everyone, and welcome to a very special online meetup. My name is Maria Lee. I'm the COO of Tech in Asia, and I'll be your moderator today. I'm super excited about today's session as it is a collaboration with two of my absolute favorite brands, Pomelo and Braze. So over here at Tech in Asia, we've been thinking a lot and talking a lot about all the drastic changes that have happened in the digital marketing landscape over the last few months, and what it's meant for brands who are trying to keep up with all the changes. What does it mean for marketers, and what can they do in this time? Of course, even before COVID-19, how brands were communicating with their customers was already rapidly changing. You saw the rise of Gen Z, you saw multi-channel communications, and COVID-19 has obviously only accelerated a lot of these different trends. So amidst all the craziness, we wanted to understand what some of the best practices that brands have found in order to keep checking in on their customers in this time, but in a really authentic and honest way. And which brands have set themselves up for better engagement and so that they can thrive and kind of accelerate into the recovery as the world adjusts to the new normal. So we ended up deciding to pull together today's session with the help of two brands who are particular experts at this topic, Braze and Pomelo. Braze, if you don't know, is one of the world's leading customer engagement platforms, and they help brands better connect with their audiences. And Pomelo is one of Southeast Asia's leading fashion brands, who is one of the brightest and emerging e-commerce startups in the region. So without further ado, let me please welcome to the stage Kenneth Soo, the APAC customer success lead of Braze. He has deep experience with marketing platforms across Asia. And Jean Thomas, the CMO of Pomelo. Hi, guys.
Hi, Maria. How are you?
Thanks so much for joining us today. So just to everybody at home, we have around 45 minutes of just kind of chatter and panel and discussion between the three of us. And then, of course, we have always reserved some time for Q&A with the speakers. So if you have any questions, you can scroll over to the tab that says questions and just ask them, and we'll either answer them in the flow of the conversation or at the very end. Yeah? Okay, so today's topic, obviously, quite a boondoggle. Jean, maybe if we can start with you. Retail, as we know, has been one of the hardest hit industries, but we also know that Pomelo is not your traditional retailer, and you, of all people, are not a traditional CMO. So I'd love to hear more about Pomelo's experience in terms of customer engagement throughout the last few months, how y'all have adjusted your messaging and your comms and some other initiatives that you've managed to kick off during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, I think like a few things, right? It's like, I do think that Southeast Asia as a region been a bit less impacted when it comes to at least retail in general, if you compare with, let's say, European or American players, right? Like if you look at like ASOS, let's say in the UK, ASOS sales were down about 50% on online. I think in Southeast Asia, businesses a bit like Pomelo that have, a strong online presence, combined with retail. Obviously retail was closed, but then the online picked up a fair bit. Even to be transparent, our online actually doubled during COVID, which largely compensated for the retail drop. And basically, like if you look at now, it's almost back to normal. Let's say about 70%, 80% for retail, depending on the country. And online keeps thriving at the same rate as during COVID. So it's, I think it's been beneficial somewhat. And I think, again, I think crisis or COVID or not, or just crisis in general, I think it's a good time to also see like, how can you bring your team together to work toward common goal. And I actually think people are a bit more focused because they know it's a little bit tough. So I think they try to make less mistakes, a bit more conscious where they spend the money, a bit more engaging with the campaign that they do and so forth. So I think that's kind of like a quick overview, at least, of how at least we think about the situation. Yeah.
Sure. So maybe, I mean, obviously very few retailers can claim that they're almost back to normal at this point. So you guys are obviously in a great position in that sense. So anything that you guys already had set up as part of like your e-commerce DNA, or that was already like in flight for the company, that helped you adjust a little bit more quickly to the change in reality, like come March of this year, basically?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're quite agile as a setup. We have quite like lean team in general. I think that's the first aspect. And the second aspect is like we do everything in house. So actually, I think having all the resources in-house. I mean, Pomelo marketing team today is 68 people. That covers basically every aspect of marketing you can imagine. And so I think having everyone in-house is a bit of a chance because, again, if you have agencies, they also have their own problems, right? But when you have Pomelo, your team is dedicated to here, and I think they're able to come up with great initiatives that basically can kind of like match expectation of customer during these times. And I think we'll go through some of it today, but I think in general, that been key for us is like, how do we produce content, or how do we, let's say, have a strong acquisition strategy during these times? And I think we're able to do this just because of the lean and no hierarchy type of structure that Pomelo has, and then the second one is by having everything in house. I think these two things combined help a little bit. If I compare to some of the organizations that I spoke to, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think you've definitely seen team culture and structural organization, I think, come to play to this one. All right, let's deep dive some of the initiatives that y'all actually did. I know we have some slides on this. Do you want to take us through the next few in terms of some specific initiatives that y'all launched?
Yeah, so I think the first one, actually, luckily, again, somewhat, like Pomelo live stream was kicked off back in November last year, actually. It happened to go live, I believe, for our spring summer collection, which was somewhere in March, which was also our last event offline, I suppose. And so it was kind of like fortunate because at first we launched Pomelo live stream thinking, well, let's just focus on like generating sales and et cetera, et cetera. But then when COVID hit, we kind of like changed the strategy a little bit to focus more on content. Well, like people are going to be at home, they're going to be bored. How can we bring them good content so they connect with Pomelo brand? And the type of content we brought was from a range of cooking show to fitness to fashion advice to makeup to dancing to pretty much anything. I think I'm quite proud of this initiative because most of the people that were featured on the live stream were actually people from small businesses that basically had no jobs anymore. And so actually they came on Pomelo. That was a bit like a platform for them to get visibility and kind of like grow their own following for, I suppose, post crisis. The second thing is like actually the team that work on this is basically like two people, and two people were able to basically pull about like a show every single day, so almost 30 show a month, which I think it's pretty good achievement. Obviously, we work with a lot of influencers, so a lot of them were quite keen to participate as well. They were a bit bored at home, so I think this initiative, like in general, been pretty good. So we did it both on our own app and social channels, Facebook and Instagram for some of it. And I think it's been quite interesting because I think like the engagement became super high. If I look at now, even like some of the content, actually, we let it sit on the platform on Facebook and so forth. Some of the video now I have like 300,000 views, so I think it's been quite interesting that both live did well, but then also the post live, people just watching it on the weekend and so forth. And now that we went back to a new normal somewhat, we've been producing again different type of content. So recently we have a new office. We just did like office tours. That did very, very well. We've been doing a bunch of games. We've been trying out selling always on live stream, and that was actually our biggest live show. And actually from next month, half of the show will be more sales focused, and the other half will still be content. And I think we want to keep that as a part of the DNA. Actually to a point that even as a company, we kind of like decided we want to become a more of a content hub, kind of like the go-to place to shop and to consume like lifestyle fashion content, I suppose, as we felt there was a bit of a gap in Asia as opposed to outside of like, the YouTube of these worlds.
Yeah.
So I think quite cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And definitely, I think what you mentioned about the post live, like we just ran our first virtual conference just last week. And what we saw was like the live attendees, I think, were pretty healthy, but then there's a massive bump of viewership because people know that this is a different type of way to consume content.
Yeah, and I think like again, right, like it had also another aspect, right? Because you have the consumer facing aspect. But I think for, most of the shows are done with also our staff. And I think a lot of staff been very like engaged with it. It's kind of like a lot of them are like micro influencers, or some of them even influencers in Thailand and other countries. So for them, it kind of like gives a platform to kind of like be featured. It kind of like give you another way to like, engage with the employee and have fun. I think that aspect also been quite good. And with the result, I think you can see here speak for itself. I think it's been quite interesting, and actually we just want to double down on it and make it bigger. And we see, I think the way we do it is very different from, let's say, a Lazada or Shopee, which is more like sales focused per se, or gamified, right? I think for us, we want to have a mixture of content.
Yeah. So, I mean, these numbers are pretty impressive, right? 1,100% growth in total views, and then 13 million users reached via live stream. How did you kind of build up to these numbers? I mean, what was your acquisition strategy?
I mean, I think he was like, I tell you, it was like super low cost, like how we did it. It was like almost no budget, actually, because it was never really planned properly. So it was no budget. It was just like, let's just do it. If you do good content consistently, like, you will get some results. It's a bit like at first when we started, I remember people were like, oh my God, this is never going to work. And then with the first show, and he did a pretty average. And then the second show did a bit average as well. And then, as you progress, it does a bit better than average. And then, as you, I guess, get into like month 3, it starts to get pretty good. And I think it's the same as anything, right? It's a bit like, if you want to be a YouTuber, right? Like the first video, unless you're a bit lucky, it's not that great. But when you do like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of videos, at some point you build a following, and then people start to look forward to the next show, et cetera, et cetera. So I think we try to keep the same logic, and we try to keep the team motivated actually on this. And then, because it can be quite, I think, demotivating at the beginning when you see like how many views you have. Like it feels like a long way to, maybe let's say 100K. But then, I think like the path, basically, if you look at every single week, you've been basically beating the week before in terms of viewership, and then you just keep progressing. So, I mean, in our head, it's like just math, right? It's like, if it's an exponential growth, even if it's smaller growth, if you grow 20% every week, I mean, by the end of the year, it's great. It's a very good compound interest. So like, I think that's the idea that we had. And we did the same thing with TikTok, actually. We launched TikTok, and we had the same logic, growing the following and so forth. And I think it's getting to a good point as well. So I think in Pomelo, that's a bit how we see things of like, it's not because it doesn't work at the beginning that it's bad. Sometimes it just takes time and efforts, Yeah.
Yeah. So this slide also kind of caught my eye when the team sent it over. So, I mean, I think this also speaks to what I mentioned in the intro, which is like Gen Z and millennials right now, they're really expecting the brands that they shop with and they buy with and, engage with to kind of also reflect their values and their values for sustainability and across the board. So I think, Pomelo obviously came out relatively quickly with Pomelo Cares. Do you want to kind of talk about what was the genesis for this idea behind the scenes and how you incubated the overall?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was like, if I remember correctly, it's like when we started actually in Thailand, it was a bit of a very difficult to find mask in general. And at that time, the Thai government just, I think, banned Lazada and other from selling masks because too many people trying to make a profit with it. So it was actually quite difficult. And then obviously we have 300 something staff here and plus about 200 in retail. So we kind of like wanted to make sure everyone is covered. So that's kind of like how it started. Then we were like, well, if we're going to basically produce, since it's our job to produce in general, might as well just produce bigger. But then we say, well, we don't want to be one of these companies that basically sell masks to just make a profit. The idea was like, well, let's do two things. Let's just sell some masks that we think, can be sold for profit, maybe like reusable and more fashionable. And then after we'll sell like a very basic mask, but basically everything goes to profit, everything goes to charity. We don't take any markup on it. It's basically sold like cost price, and then everything goes to charity after. So, and we did this for Singapore, Indonesia, Thailand particularly. And then we partner with a few organizations that we could, donate the money from the mask. People were also able to make donations directly if they wanted to. And basically, again, right, it's like, it's good for customers, it's good for employee, because to be honest, like, if you are 20 something, I think people care more and more about like doing good, not just about, making profits. So I think it was like different aspects. And I think with this initiative, we started a kickoff on Monday, and like the week after it was basically there, all the team was super motivated to do it, because it's like kind of nice, making sure that everyone will be covered. A lot of their friends and family were also getting from Pomelo, and we never ran out of stock. So actually we always was able to like supply anyone in market that basically wanted to get masks. And after we extended into hand wash and other categories as well. And recently we just did a collaboration with a smiley company to do like smiley mask. We just started to bring more like fashion related product, because what you see now is like more and more women in Thailand, at least, wanting to match their dress with a mask basically, or match, kind of like use as an accessory. So we started to bring more and more, I suppose, different, more of like fashion mask per se. And I think that does pretty well, as well.
Yeah, just a little bit of flair, of course.
Yeah, of course.
So Kenneth, let me bring you into the conversation here. There's obviously a lot of noise online right now, and Jean and his team at Pomelo, they figured out, how to kind of craft their various initiatives to fit their branding and to reach out to their customers in an authentic way. And from your opinion, what you're seeing at Braze, what are some other ways that brands can cut through that noise?
Yeah, I think two things, just to put it back to what John has shared with the great work that Pomelo has done, is one, helping and engaging with your community, and two, doing that while enabling human and one-to-one connection. So I really love the work that Pomelo did to engage with not only customers, but also various other members of the community during this time. And it was not sales motivated at all. It was really to engage with with activities that really resonated with the community. And I think enabling human connections, making the message personal, speaking to a cause that is personal to the user, is, I think, something that really goes a long way in times like this.
All right, Kenneth, let's stick with you for a second. And I'm basically going to treat you as our like marketing guru with, and like for other brand insights. So can you help to share some of the insights into, across the world, at least, the opportunities and some of the recovery trends that y'all from Braze are seeing?
Yep. So going through a few of the trends that Braze saw from a global and regional point of view from our customer bases, we noticed that there was a really huge spike in user acquisition as we adjusted to the new normal in the early part of the year. And one very significant thing, also to go back to what John was speaking about acquisition earlier in the year, was that we noticed that at the start of the year, user acquisition peaked on the week of March 23rd. And user acquisition for this week was 75% higher than it was at the start of the year. And we saw the largest lifts in industries across education to on-demand retail. And if you look at the other industries on this slide here, video streaming, entertainment, on-demand food and beverages, and games, these are all reflective of products and services that are more likely to be used personally and online. So this also heralded the shift from physical experiences to virtual experiences for a lot of brands. So what does this mean for these brands? Well, essentially, in terms of new acquisition, to put it in perspective, all right, these brands performed 18% better in terms of acquiring new users in the first quarter of this year compared to last quarter. Now, as most e-commerce brands would know, the last quarter of the year is typically where we find the most activity with shopping occasions like 11/11, 12/12, Black Friday, for example. So the fact that this crisis brought on 18% more new users compared to that period was an entirely new shopping season and period that brands were not anticipating in this. And to further drive down into that number, right, 65% of all new buyers between May and June were actually new users who joined in February or later. So this number represents the number of new users that brands had engaged at this time. So if you weren't having an online or virtual experience with your brand, or if you weren't shopping online with them before COVID, you definitely were post-COVID. So what we've encouraged our customers to do is to not just take this organic acquisition as a one-time thing, but really focus on the opportunities to retain your customers through great experiences and activities that really speak to the individual, and also to maintain a great user experience.
Okay, so the user acquisition numbers are obviously awesome. And I think that was probably like, when you think about it, it makes sense kind of logically, right? People are stuck at home, which means that it's easier to, like the online traffic overall is going up. And so it's kind of easier to get in front of them. But at the same time, I think on the macroeconomic side, you know, we were hearing a lot about like marketing budgets getting frozen or like slashed horribly. And so like as marketers, how do you kind of balance the two, right? Between relatively cheaper top of the funnel acquisition for new customers and new users versus like, you know, significantly reduced budgets, and then a lot of advice out there being like, stop spending money on sales and marketing right now. John, go ahead.
I mean, I do believe like, okay, there's different aspects. For example, I said certain companies, maybe they're like, let's say, in need of fundraising or something like that. So they have to cut down just because, well, you cannot have to decide whether you pay for electricity or marketing, right? So if I put this aside, let's say you're a healthy company and whatnot, like I think any businesses that basically cut down on acquisition during COVID was a mistake. Like, I mean, really think it was a mistake because like it basically, if you think about it, right, if everyone cut down, it just kind of sound like the best time to acquire, like because, you know, depending on what you sell, obviously, but like technically speaking, it's the best time because A, it will be cheaper, most likely. And then B, you know, it's a good time to kind of like acquire customers from your competitors. And again, it kind of like goes back to like, you know, the Warren Buffett quote, right? Which is like, you know, be greedy when others are fearful, right? I think it's a little bit like, at least what we applied to Pomelo, because during COVID, we actually increased our acquisition target and we increased, you know, our top line growth rate. You know, like we're like, let's just double down and just acquire more. They basically acquire, you know, the whole market where everyone is just trying to like figure out their life. And I think it's even more relevant to us because most of our competitors will be, let's say, 80% retail, 20% online, something like that, right? When Pomelo will be the other way around, let's say. So actually during this time, it's like the best time to just acquire everything, where everyone is so busy, like dealing with, you know, the store closures and etc. So I think that's been a little bit the mindset. During COVID, I think like you have to, I think we were quite creative as well in terms of like how to like look at like all the people, let's say, that maybe sign up but never bought, you know, like how do you make them buy for the first time now that they kind of like only can buy online, etc., you know, with good engagement strategy. You know, and I think it all came down to like, how do we get more new customers? Because again, when you acquire a new customer, at least in e-commerce, generally you only get the benefits on your top line a quarter or 2 quarters from now. So basically the idea was like, well, if you assume COVID will get better, then let's say 2 quarters from now, or at least it will not get worse, then actually acquiring all these new customers will basically benefit you for Q4, which is basically like the high shopping season. While everyone else that basically cut down will have so much churn and enter Q4 in a very like, kind of like not very great situation, you know? So that was kind of like our logic. But obviously each company has their own, you know, issues, but at least for us, it was how we saw it, yeah.
So John, y'all are venture backed for sure. And So runway is definitely always an issue for startups, of course. And then, runway part of the factor is burn. So it sounds like you went out. Did you actually increase marketing spend during COVID?
Yes, almost we cut a little bit on some stuff that made no sense, right? So for example, we cut on our home because obviously nobody's outdoor. Or we cut on certain retail marketing, or we cut a little bit on some influencer spend just because it's not as much interesting content can be produced at that time. But everything else is basically up. And some of it, they say your Facebook of this world will be up 100%, almost in spend. Yeah.
How did you convince your CEO and the rest of your leadership team to increase on marketing spend?
I think again, right, because we don't have a strong hierarchy per se, or at least we have good trust between each other. I think in general, we quite align in terms of strategy. I think everyone, at least in the C-level team in Pomelo, is quite, logical. We kind of have the same background somewhat, a little bit. And so I do think it was a pretty easy conversation. It was just a phone call. Hey, how about we just double the spend? We'll basically acquire more people. That will help us for Q4. I think we want to show good result to also investors during this time, showing that Pomelo really come on top, because if you're an investor, you have a portfolio of 100 company, you kind of want to see the one that survived during crisis. And yeah, I think it was a very simple decision. And again, we have good support team as well that forecasted how they think it could go. And I think what we say is, let's try, and if it happens at the right cost, then it just keep spending. And I think again we were a bit fortunate that we did a big series in September last year. So obviously, the financing side of things was not the issue during this time. When maybe some companies really didn't really have a choice. It's we kind of need the money to keep going. So, and generally, marketing is one of your largest expense with staff, right? So, yeah.
Cool.
But even lastly on this, even Pomelo did not have, let's say as an example, we didn't have salary reductions. We didn't lay off anyone because of that. We actually even kept all our retail staff despite, basically no retail stores. I think we try to keep things in a way that made some sense as soon as we can show that we can basically increase the top line. So then you kind of support the whole business as part of this. Yeah.
That sounds amazing. And sounds like you tied it through a tough time very well, obviously. So Kenneth, you mentioned, turning these organic acquisition opportunities into retention opportunities as well. Any retention strategies specifically that y'all are seeing that's working particularly effective now?
Well, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, both. Yeah.
No worries. Yeah. So there's a few strategies that we've seen from some clients. So there was one example of a customer that I'm gonna highlight, Canva. So during this period, they decided that they wanted to double down on their retention. So they wanted to increase the number of sends. And Canva is a graphic design platform, an online graphic design platform that communicates with millions of users in a day. And they actually wanted to increase their weekly sending of emails from 30 million to 50 million email to respond to the advent of people staying at home a little bit more. So they took a three-pronged approach to it. Firstly is making sure that their content was engaging and relevant to the customer, right? And then the second was slowly increasing on their email sends while maintaining their high deliverability rate. And at the same time, they also wanted to launch a new localization strategy during this time to be able to better engage and retain their audience. Because to put in perspective, about 55% of Canva's user base does not have English as their first language. So sending out communications in the right language would definitely go a long way to creating a better experience for the customers that they would keep on coming back to the brand. And I think the results here speak for themselves. They increased their open rates by 88%. There was a 2.5% increase in platform engagement for the millions of users. And they also managed to maintain an extremely high deliverability rate of their emails while still sending extreme volumes to users. So I think what we're seeing here is simple ways of boosting retention. If you know what your customer base wants and you know how to engage with them in the right way.
Cool. That's pretty amazing. It sounds like, brands who kind of stick to their core values and then also really understand their customer are able to craft these strategies and been able to turn these last few months, obviously, into like this amazing opportunity to acquire and retain. So let me pause here for a second and ask everybody at home who's dialed in. So since COVID-19 hit, what percentage of your messages have checked in on your customers in regards to the pandemic? So this is like that personal check-in message and comms to your customers. So if you mouse over to the third tab, I can't see your setup at home, but if you mouse over to your third tab, you see polls, and you can kind of fill in your answer there. So it's either 0 to 25% of your total messages have checked in, 25 to 50, 50 to 75, 75 to 100. And let's just give one more second for people to trickle in. This one I felt was always particularly tricky because, of course, like, you ended up hearing from brands that you haven't talked to in like years, being like, hello, we're thinking about you during this time. And that stuff felt so phony. And then, of course, there were some brands that like did such a great job actually communicating like a very personalized message. And I'm not in comms, so I just felt like that difference was really obvious as a customer. In terms of the overall sincerity.
Yeah, we saw a lot of examples of brands trying to force a conversation during COVID when there was no need to do so. Like there was no communication between me and the brand for the past 12 months. Why would I need to hear from you? And imagine this happening with all of the brands that you're subscribed to. So you get maybe 50 or 80 of the same kind of message coming into you. It can be a bit overwhelming and then borderline annoying as well.
Totally. Yeah. This definitely goes back to that like authentic, brand driven like value conversation that you need to be having. Okay. So I think most of the votes are in. 49% of y'all said that 0 to 25% of your customer messages checked in on your customer. 20% was 25 to 50%, and another 20% was 50 to 75. So only 11% of you said that over 75% of your messages checked in on customers. So I think this goes to show like brands did have a difficult time trying to find that balance where they weren't like annoying, but they were also trying to be honest and truthful in terms of checking in on their customers. All right, so before we move on to Q&A, and it looks like some questions are popping in, and Jean has already responded to some. Let's try to wrap up the session with some really actionable takeaways that brands and marketers should be deploying now as we are definitely heading into this new normal. So Kenneth, if you can help kick us off, what are 3 pithy best practices that you would advise for brands?
I would advise 3 points. The first is to just be more human with your brand and your users. The second is to use whatever tools you have at your disposal to retain these users after big acquisition. And also number 3 is to just keep it personal, keep it one-to-one with users. So with be more human, like we discussed, stay away from that forced humanity thing, keep it natural, offer experiences that resonate with your user base and community. With retaining your users, it's using your tools, your messaging, and your technology available to you to be able to provide these experiences on a one-to-one basis with your customers. And then lastly, to keep it personal, it goes beyond just knowing your customer's name. It also means knowing when is the right time to engage with them, what are the right things to show to them. Ultimately, a combination of all 3 factors will lead to a better customer experience overall.
Thank you, Kenneth. And John, maybe let's, we started with you, let me end with you as well. If you were going to reflect backwards and go back to like February of this year, for example, is there anything that you wish you had done differently now knowing what you do?
Well, I wish we launched our loyalty program earlier. I mean, actually, it's not even live yet, so I guess it's almost live. But I wish we did it like pre-COVID, like we did live stream. I think that would have been that would have come a long way.
Sorry,
but I
can
guess,
you explain why? Like, why do you think the loyalty program would have mattered more during COVID-19 than any other?
I mean, I think it's like, again, when we say about like retention, I think like at least the program that we design, I think is really made in a way which is a bit different from what fashion retailers are doing out there. And then, you know, I think in terms of retention, I think it will have basically give a little bit of uplift, right? I mean, despite I think we did everything we could in terms of retention, but I think again, loyalty kind of like give you that slight advantage during this time, and we saw some of our competitors that released loyalty program during COVID actually. So it was a bit slow on the aspect. Actually, I think also wise, like I think we could even have been more aggressive, to be honest, during COVID. I mean, like last month was our best month ever, like as a company, and by far, like and so I think it's good. But again, I think we could have gone even further. There's a lot of adjustment that we could have made. Obviously, in some aspects, sometimes we were a bit more careful when maybe we could have been a little bit more aggressive per se. But I think overall, when I look back, like, I'm super proud of the teams. Like I think they all did a very good job. Particularly because most of them, don't have the experience to even go through like hardship in a company. So I think for them it was a bit like first time, like kind of like crisis mode. I think I have a bit more experience in companies that have crisis, so I think I'm a bit more fortunate. But like, no, I think that's all I would say. Just loyalty, I think would probably be one big aspect. Yeah, for sure.
All right, and anything that you both are keeping an eye on as like an upcoming or emerging trend that that is starting to make waves either here in Asia or globally that you think that is going to end up impacting marketers in Asia?
I mean, I think TikTok, right? Like, I mean, the numbers are astonishing. They just became the most downloaded app in the world of all time. Yeah, I mean, we've been trying to take on a bit. We actually have a big campaign coming out, I think next week or so, in partnership with TikTok and featuring the largest celebrity in Thailand together. So I think we'll try to tap on a bit more into TikTok because the rates actually for people interested into TikTok, the rates of TikTok actually quite decent in Southeast Asia at the moment. In the US, is almost 10 times more expensive to do a TikTok campaign. It's so I think right now it's a good time to do it because I'm pretty sure 6 months from now it will be very expensive. So I think that's what we've been thinking. I think live stream obviously is very good, and I will highly encourage everyone to do live stream, whether they use directly the channel like Facebook, Instagram, and other, or they want to build the tech themselves, or they even want to partner with companies that already have the tech. They can just like plug and play into their app. I think this one is a very good one in terms of like being more human and natural. I mean, it's a bit like us today, right? Somewhat. It's a bit like more conversational. Yeah, I think these two things I think are pretty massive. And I think the third one, maybe we should be linked to our industry. I think people will start to like, at least in this part of the world, invest more into sustainability or be more health conscious and anything around that topic. I mean, Pomelo already started a while ago to produce like sustainable collection and etc. And as part of our business plan, we kind of like adjusted it to make it even further, bringing more brands now on the platform that are sustainable. Invest more into redoing. We redid all our like packages to be like all sustainable. Like I think that part in any businesses people will care for. I think just COVID, will have definitely made a big switch in people's mind, which is great. Like I think that would be the positive outcome of COVID. Yeah.
Kenneth, anything that we missed?
Well, I think from my point of view, I think definitely TikTok and other social channels would be a big thing. And from my perspective, I'm very curious to see how brands straddle the importance between your own channels like email, your push messaging with these up and coming social channels like TikTok, and how do we kind of merge these two channels together? And I think one interesting trend that I've noticed in the recent months is that customers are much more willing to experiment and test on things, because oftentimes when conversions and business are not doing too well, this is the best time to test and have a experimentation mentality. And I think some of the best ideas are born out of this testing.
Yeah. So on the experimentation, so I think that one is, clearly one of the ways that Jean and the Pomelo team were able to differentiate themselves. It feels like, just keep trying, experiment. I mean, that kind of culture is really hard to come by. Yeah. And so what does it take, I mean, to kind of build that sort of culture and mentality of experimentation? How do you kind of calculate? I mean, of course, then there's always risk and like the chance that your experiment fails, right? So how do you kind of build that into the company culture and into the DNAs?
I think John said it best himself when he said that the relationship between him and the rest of the management team is built on trust. And I think you need to have that trust from management to the working level team to have that kind of accountability to be able to take risks where appropriate, and also knowing when to kind of pull back on the risk a little bit. And I think it takes not just understanding of the risks involved, but also having a data-focused culture to be able to assess all the numbers that you have on hand and the facts available, and then make an informed decision on what you want to try and do.
Definitely.
I think as well, it's a bit like you need to develop a bit like the, not giving up mentality a little bit. I think like, even here, I mean, sometimes, I see some projects where people are like, oh, the results are not very good, we should just like cancel the project. And it's a bit too easy, right? If for every single project that did not really work out at the beginning, you just stop it. I mean, you basically end up with nothing, Like
imagine if you cancel your live stream after the first week, right?
I mean, everyone told me to cancel it, and I was just like, it's fine, just relax, Like I was like, you need to try a bit harder, right? And I think particularly because even in Southeast Asia, there's so much complexity, right? Like each market being different, so many customer profiles, like, it's a little bit complex that you just have to sometimes just iterate a little bit, I think don't be too stubborn long term on your ideas, but I think like you can try a few times. Like even us, there is some stuff that we do that pretty bad, but we think that if we try hard enough, eventually it might be good. It might never be good, but it might be good as well.
Yeah. I mean, we definitely suffer from the same, like we'll try like a different type of story or like a different type of coverage or format or something like that. If it doesn't go well the first time, the human reaction, like they hate it, just pack it up, go home, go back to what you know. But yeah, it sometimes does take, multiple iterations for you to know what you want or what you're doing, and for also the audience to understand and see that difference.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, so over on the Q&A tab, Christina has the most upvoted question. So how many of the 1,100% growth in total views for Pomelo translate into actual sales?
So everyone keep asking me this, and I've been interviewed so many times on live stream. I think there's a few aspects, right? You have to go back to what was the goal of doing it. And the goal of doing it was not to do sales. The goal of doing it was to engage customer. So, and I think there was two approaches that we could have taken, right? You can go the hardcore sales way, which is what Lazada and Shopee does, right? Which is fair. And then you have like maybe the more content driven, right? Which is a bit more like, let's take a lifestyle channel. And I think for us, we felt like, well, since, we already do a lot of sales, we already do a lot of campaign and promotions, how about we just try to, do good content as we like to do. And so the main focus was really like get people to watch it, get people to like, be engaged with this content. So then 3, 4, 6 months from now, at that time, then we can basically start to introduce some show resale, and then people would just basically naturally be engaged and then buy, right? But the thing is that what you don't want, again, is like just trying to push more into your customers to buy, when when people will see it's obvious, you're not doing it because you care, you're just doing it because you just want to make money, right? So I think for us, like again, like we're looking at 3 types: pure sales show, and they'll be clearly identified, and people that want that, they can have that. Pure like lifestyle show, and then some of them which is a little bit a mix, right? You'll have, let's say, influencers doing maybe, let's say, a Q&A on how to be like an Instagram like celeb, and then maybe the person will also highlight some of the product that she's wearing today, and people can buy it at the end. Maybe hybrid a little bit this way. But I think we want to make sure customers understand what each of the live streamers are, and not trying to just hide it somewhat. So short answer, I don't really want to comment. We generally don't comment on like sales and numbers, at least outside the company. All I can say is like the base show that we did was a sales show, and it resulted in pretty strong sales growth rate. Hence why in August, half of our shows will be also sales, because it's been a pretty successful test. But again, I'm also happy to do content. Content is great. Content can sell. So.
Sure. So
long term.
Well, that goes to the experimentation, right, and seeing what works.
Right.
Kind of on a similar path. So what are some, beyond some of the live streaming shows that you've already mentioned, what are some other ways that you plan on retaining newly acquired users after the lockdown restrictions ease here in Southeast Asia?
Well, so we're going to finally launch this loyalty program.
Good. 加油 on that one.
Yeah, like it's a very sensitive topic these days. So like we're going to finally launch it, which I think is probably good after all the acquisition. So I think that's number one. I think the second thing we've been trying to do better, it's all the onboarding parts. So kind of like, how do you care about, not even customer yet, let's say like signups, right? Like how do you take them on, or how you take on your customer the first 7 days in a way that they basically engage with your brand, right? So all the onboarding part, we've been reviewing this. The third one, actually, in August, we're going to release a completely different app, rebranding and so forth. Actually, our office already has a rebranding, but the apps and sites will be rebranded from a both look and feel and in terms of like functionality, because Pomelo used to be one brand, right? And then it became 6, 7, I suppose, private label brands. And then now it became a platform where we have like 80 something brand that we basically buy inventory from and so on Pomelo. So I think we want to make it like a bit more obvious and a bit easier to navigate for customers. I think that will also help a little bit on the retention side by providing basically people more choices that they can buy. Luckily in Thailand, the stores reopened already, and it's quite, busy somewhat outside of like the tourist coming to Thailand. So, again, like I think the stores and stuff, and particularly try to be a little bit more like personal with the customers coming in and so forth. Trying to be a bit more, engaging, while respecting like social measures. So, I think we're not too worried about the retention side of things. And again, like fashion is very cycle based, right? People don't. Some people do buy like clothing on Pomelo maybe every week, but the majority, will buy like several times a year, right? If you look at most fashion companies in the world, I think you will have like a frequency of like 4 to 5 times a year, roughly, per customer. So even if you acquire today, I think the average person will buy a quarter from now. So I think it's okay on that aspect. Yeah.
Kenneth, let me turn it back to you quickly. So as the customer engagement platform, obviously, with the different lockdowns and remote teams working, it's kind of affected the way that the different teams within a company would work together in order to provide that sort of overall customer, like that really seamless customer engagement process and feel to the customer. So any best practices that you're seeing in terms of like collaboration between different teams within a company and how they can work together more effectively to create that seamless experience?
Yeah, I think one thing that we've noticed among like high-performing companies is that since the stay-at-home orders were made, that they had made a conscious choice of over communication with their teams. And I think having like regular stand-ups and keeping everyone involved on what you're gonna do, and like just keeping everyone involved in what your plans are, and also getting collaboration and ideas in on what you want to do like makes a huge difference.
All right, and then we have this question from Shiling. I think this goes back to the poll probably, but is there any specific copy to stay away from so that you don't sound insensitive as a brand? So anything that kind of like hints at that inauthenticity.
Yeah. I think for this, it really boils down to a couple of things. The first is, what is your brand's tone of voice? Is your brand more serious when it speaks to the public, or is it a little bit more fun and easygoing? So, for example, Burger King, they actually hire stand-up comedians as their writers for all their social copy, and I think it shows in their campaign. So, I think what we should be thinking about is not about copy in particular, but about the tone of voice that you're using. And as long as it is consistent with your brand's tone of voice, I think you're on the right track from there.
All right, fair enough. So being consistent, I think, obviously very important.
And be sensitive, you know, like I saw some brands so insensitive actually the other day. Like, you know, there are some brands they were using like memes during like COVID and so forth. I'm just like, there's nothing funny about it, you know, like, so it's like, I think you want to make sure that, I think staying neutral is probably a good idea actually. Like, neutral and personal, like you will talk to your friends, right? Like there's nothing like, I mean, I know Asia have been a bit less concerned somewhat, but like, you know, UK, Europe and the States, it's pretty bad. So I think there is nothing like, I think being more neutral and caring, I think, is more important.
Yeah. But there's also that internet meme where it's like, you know, did you ever really send an email if you didn't start with hi there, hope you're staying well and safe during this time, you know? And so it's, I mean, it's hard. And I think everybody kind of struggles with this one. But I do think people are fairly forgiving. It's obviously crazy times for everybody. And so as long as you're authentic and like you mean it, what you're saying, I think people are generally pretty okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. All right. One or two more questions and we'll end this session. It's from Jacqueline. So can you clarify organic acquisition strategy considering there's a mention of an increase in marketing spend to acquire more customers?
So I mean, for us, like, okay, as an example, right? Let's say anything SEO and so forth. Like, it's not like our Superman focus. And Pomelo is like, you know, 80+% on app. So it's just what it is. I think where we do a lot of organic though is more like, again, on like social media. I think our following is pretty strong. Anything linked to influencers. I mean, we work with a lot of influencers without having to pay for it, just because Pomelo being, you know, a big brand here. You know, in terms of like, again, producing good content for live stream and so forth. So really like, most of our organic strategy are like obviously emails and all the, most of our organic strategy is really around producing just good content, you know, for it. Like, you know, it's like, I don't think there is like, I wake up in the morning, I'm like, I'm going to create an amazing organic strategy, you know, like it's more like, okay, what's the content plan for the month? You know, is it what we want to do? You know, like what kind of content does well? You know, how can we do better? You know, for the long term, you know, create better plan for the next 6 months and then just keep doing it. Like, I think a lot of marketers, they overthink a little bit, you know, like, or maybe I don't think enough, I don't know. But like, I think, you know, just take things simple and just like think if it's good and, you know, if it's something your friends will enjoy, then just do that. You know, like there's no need to like overthink the organic strategy. Of course, it's great not to pay, but unfortunately, in this world, a lot of the time you have to pay.
Kenneth, thoughts from your side?
Yeah, I have to agree. I think when it comes to an organic strategy, as long as it's good, if you feel like it's a conversation between friends and if it comes off naturally, then I think you're on the right track with that.
Okay, so going back to that humanized approach, of course. Okay, all right. I think that is mostly it. The other questions, it seems like we've actually already covered a bunch of. So let me just thank you both so much for your time today. I think definitely we've all learned a lot And again, thanks so much to the Braze and Pomelo brands for collaborating with us on this particular session. I think obviously a lot of things are changing in the marketing landscape now, and marketers have, like, it feels like marketers, their job scope over the last like 10 years or whatever has kept increasing and increasing, let alone trying to navigate the crazy digital marketing landscape that we currently find ourselves in. So thanks so much for your guidance and sharing your experiences. Really appreciate it. To everybody at home, I hope this doesn't come off as inauthentic, but really hope you all stay well and safe. And yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.